IVM.
Hi, everybody. Just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, I'm Sarthak, and I welcome you to one more episode of All Things Policy. In this episode, we'll discuss about government responsiveness. Basically, we'll try to understand when and how governments deliver goods and services in response to citizens' preferences. What are those factors which might have a bearing on government's responsiveness? The discussion is based on a recent paper, Government Responsiveness in Developing Countries, and we will share the link of the paper with this podcast. For this episode, I have with me my colleague Suman. Hi, Suman. Welcome once again to All Things Policy.
Hi, Sarthak.
Yeah. So before we start, I just want to give some context to this discussion. World over, governments provide different public goods and services. But the question is, how responsive are the governments to citizens' preference for these services? If citizens needs these service, is the government prompt enough in delivering the same? Is the quality of service good enough? If not, what can be done to improve along these lines? This is the main subject of inquiry of the authors of this paper. And the authors have done a very good literature review around this. And they've also highlighted some areas which need to be researched further. Now, to understand government responsiveness, we need to look at three types of interactions. The interaction between politicians and citizens, the interaction between politicians and bureaucrats, the interaction between the citizens and the bureaucrats. All these three factors are important. Generally, one or two dimensions is considered, but all three dimensions are not considered. So what we'll do is we'll try to understand all these dimensions, these dynamics, and then we will try to understand what can be done to improve these dynamics, which in turn can lead to better government responsiveness. So, Suman, when it comes to the interaction between citizens and bureaucrats, at present, what are some of the challenges usually, especially and again specifically in developing countries, and how this can be fine-tuned?
Yeah, so from whatever we see all around us, the first point of contact for a citizen with any government is the bureaucrat. Yeah, sure, we vote for the politician, etc. But your first your first interaction with any government or public service is through the machinery, through the bureaucratic machinery. So if you're looking at, say, last week I just went to the passport office. So that is a citizen service that the government provides us. So our first touch point is the bureaucracy, right? So the citizens' judgment of how a government is doing, or the citizens' understanding of what the government does, etc., is based on our interaction with these front-facing or really like completely in the frontline workers of any of these government systems, say passport office, say education, say healthcare. Of course, as elites, we have kind of exited out of systems that we don't have to necessarily be part of. But for a common person, lay person, education, health, or any of these others, water, etc., are their touch points with the government. And the bureaucrat is actually playing a role of an agent of the government. So the government representative is bureaucrat. Common citizen does not actually distinguish between a politician, a bureaucrat, etc. For them, the bureaucrat is the government. So our our entire interaction or our entire judgment of what the government is delivering is based on our interaction with these bureaucrats. So that's where I think a huge amount of challenge comes in, and a lot of challenges and a lot of study has been done to understand behavior and other such things. So that's where the paper starts off also.
So Suman, this is the interaction bit, right? But
Mhm.
what can be done to improve the service delivery on part of the bureaucrats, right? So bureaucrats are supposed to provide for some services. I mean, as you mentioned, they are the first touch points. As you mentioned that you went to a government office and they are the bureaucrats who are supposed to provide you some services. But what hinders this performance and what can be done about it?
Yeah. So this paper actually is talking about how do we make bureaucrats internalize, the welfare aspect of, from provision of services, or or citizens' preferences for a certain service. So how do we make the bureaucrats internalize that need for it, right? So they say that mostly it comes from two factors. Either there is top-down oversight, that is, their politicians or, politicians who they are accountable to, or the system that they are accountable to has a good system of checks and balances of overseeing what they're doing as good metrics for measurement. That is one part of it. The second part is if there is bottom up monitoring, that is, citizens themselves have, avenues to air their grievances or to, actually approach and get out information from the bureaucrats themselves. So talking about, top down oversight or, any of these things, the paper talks about, a concept of embeddedness. Okay, so it refers like to the social relationships that influence civil servants' preferences and behavior. So, what do we mean by that? Means that bureaucrats, since they also are come from the same society as us, they are also prey to the same kind of biases, same kind of preferences, other such things. But being in the position that they are in, they need to rise above those biases or any kind of personal prejudices that they may have. But the paper makes a case for embeddedness, in the sense not exactly embeddedness, but since there are certain advantages of being from the same group that you are serving. So if a bureaucrat is from the same um, socioeconomic class, religion, etc., then there are certain advantages that he can actually drive, because he has information about those social classes, or their identity, their identity, whatever markers that he identifies with, or and also he is able to leverage his connections to bring about change. That is the hope. Okay. And also, when they come from these kind of embedded networks, there is also a negative incentive, or in the sense that they are likely to face greater sanction if they don't deliver on the particular service. So if I come from a certain society and I am the chosen bureaucrat for that society and I'm not delivering on my services, I can easily face sanctions from my society as such. So these things make the bureaucrat work better towards provisioning the services. But there are also certain negatives. We all know, it plays out every single day in our lives. It leads to capture of bureaucracy. And, actually, there is a study which has thrown light on this, that the civil servants, the IAS officers, who were allocated to their home state had poorer performance measures than people who are allocated out of state, which clearly points to the fact that if I am allocated to, if I'm put into the same embedded structures that I come from, then my incentive to do better or to provide those services is not as high, right? On the other hand, they also give an example of a century ago. Of course, this
Hmm.
was colonial
Yeah.
times and stuff like that. They say that Indian districts where there were Indian officers reported fewer plague, deaths during that time, during that epidemic, than districts that were
Colonial.
governed by colonial people. So there is a case for both. How do we draw that line, the fine line, to ensure that bureaucrats are providing services to their constituents without any fear, favor, or any of that? So that is about top-down accountability or top-down oversight. I think the civil service.
This is down. It's not top down, right? This is bottom up approach.
It's a mix of both, but the bottom up approach comes even in further due through, how do communities monitor,
Okay.
through, if you're looking at, say, the RTI or the PILs, those are more citizen oversights. If a citizen, actually finds a public interest litigation, then we have a case of greater citizen oversight. So that is one part of it. Yeah, we all know the pluses of the PILs, also the minuses. The PIL has actually led to, slowing down of
Overburdening of the
systems.
judiciary. The cases
Yeah.
have been pending for years together.
Yeah, and also the bottom up oversight does not get much traction because we know the asymmetry of power that exists between the
True.
citizen and the states. So there is not much bottom up, although it has improved, we could say, but it has not really taken off as much as we would like.
Yeah. So Suman, when we were talking about bureaucrats, right? You mentioned about different approaches, different oversight mechanisms. Now, this paper also talks about another kind of oversight mechanism, the top-down monitoring mechanism. So bureaucrats, they are the first touch points. They are the ones who administer different schemes of the government. They provide for different goods and services. They are the front level managers, so as to say,
Yeah.
for the government.
Yeah.
But again, the politicians are the ones who make laws, or they are the ones who will be at the top. Now, there is also a top-down monitoring mechanism. And again, the paper talks about some evidence. They say that if politicians are monitoring the administrative works, it can also lead to reduction in corruption in public works. They have some evidence for that. And given that there are some evidence which point out that the monitoring leads to reduction in corruption. So obviously the question comes that why we are not doing it more, and why politicians are not monitoring bureaucrats more, or also maybe it will always not work. So we need to understand that. So this is also something which is explored here in this paper.
Yeah, they're also talking about that, most of the time the politicians don't seem to have the functional knowledge to monitor, right? Like they don't have the expertise themselves. So how do you monitor?
That is what usually that is the case. Generally, the bureaucrats, their expertise levels are better, and on top of that, there is also a time and monetary costs, right? So politicians are there for a specific purpose, but now they're dedicating their time for this. Those costs are also there, and they look at some examples from India where they find out that politicians are willing to monitor the bureaucrats only when there is an improvement for service delivery, and for which the politicians can claim credit. Right. So if let's say politicians start monitoring the bureaucrats and they uncover some corruptions, that is something the politicians might not want to do. So especially when they are from the ruling party.
Exactly.
So only under certain conditions, politicians want to monitor the bureaucrats. And also there are some negative consequences as well. If the extent of monitoring increases, it might lead to a situation where the high performing bureaucrats, they might exit, they might feel that there is not enough freedom. So those kind of issues might also emerge, and eventually the administrative mechanism might not work as expected.
True. But I'm sure with technology, there are some interventions that they can bring about to work towards effective monitoring, right?
Yeah. So they point out that use of ICT and all might reduce this monetary costs. The time and monetary costs can be reduced to some extent.
True. Yeah.
So since we're talking about the citizen and bureaucrat dimensions, another area that they explore is the politician bureaucrat interaction, their interaction, and how this has an impact on government's responsiveness. So what they're saying is the kind of personnel system that we have, the kind of personnel policies that we have, it can also have a bearing on government responsiveness. In fact, they are exploring these dimensions and then they are coming up with different conclusions. So if you look at the administration, if you look at the bureaucracy, there are different kinds of bureaucratic systems world over. In some cases, it is the politicians who hire as well as fire bureaucrats. They have greater freedom to do so. But in some cases, the politicians do not have that much amount of freedom. The recruitment into the bureaucracy happens by some independent mechanism, or at least there will be some barriers. So politicians cannot just hire and fire anyone. So they try to compare these kind of systems. On one side, you have a patronage based systems, another instance is the civil services system. In case of India, it is primarily the civil services system. And they try to analyze which one is more responsive to the preferences of the citizens.
Surely
Now,
it can't be only one, either or. No? We should be somewhere in the middle. I'm guessing it will be the one somewhere. I mean, most systems will adapt to, will have features of both.
yeah. So that's what they're saying, right? I mean, the reason being, uh, if there is a patronage based system, then there are certain advantages. The politicians, they have chosen the bureaucrats, and most likely the bureaucrats in the system have been chosen because they were supporting a particular politician. So the ideology will be same. If the ideology is same, then again, the hassles and all might not be there, transaction costs will be low. And since the politicians can easily fire the bureaucrats might have an incentive to work as per the direction of the politicians. Bureaucrats might have access to different kinds of material and non-material resources in this case. But again, on the downside, just think of it. In reality, there are different kinds of public policy problems. To solve these public policy problems, you need to have expertise. Many of these things are complex. So if you are being selected only on the basis of because you have supported a politician, you might not have that expertise, right? So quality of service might get impacted. Apart from that, generally when you have this patronage based bureaucracy, the time horizons are quite short. Expertise is not gained by the bureaucracy. Service delivery can also get disrupted because again these bureaucrats are changing from time to time. So
Yeah.
in
So when you say time horizons are short, you mean for the politician, the time horizon is short to deliver on the promises
yeah
that made.
but
But a
yeah,
bureaucrat
that as well
needs
as bureaucrat, no, because bureaucrats have been hired by the politicians,
for
and once
just
the
that.
politicians are out of power, again someone else will come and they will hire their own set of bureaucrats.
Yeah, there's no continuity, and
Huh.
that will affect citizen services, is what we are saying. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again,
Okay.
the kind of personal systems that we have, again, there are different analysis in this paper that talk about different countries, and they find out that the results are mixed. You can't say that only this kind of personal system is more responsive. There are evidences of both. But when it comes to personal policies, here they find different evidences. What kind
Okay.
of incentives can be created within the bureaucratic system which can lead to better results? This is what they have studied. This some examples they have given. Now, for example, in some countries, what has been observed is if the wages of civil servants it increases, or it is the politicians decide that the wages will be increased for public servants. In that case, they are now attracting a larger pool of candidates, as well as they're attracting better pool of candidates. So that is what they observed.
Is there
But
any evidence in? I mean, is there any analysis of what is the
yeah, they had
differential?
these.
Of,
Yeah, they had these analysis, but I mean, they have given examples of certain countries. But the only problem here is what they're saying is public servants should have some intrinsic motivation. They should have some public service motivation. But here it is the wages that are that is getting them into the services. That extrinsic motivation is basically attracting them. So that can be one challenge. That's what they're saying. Also, another thing they're saying is maybe you can pay more to those candidates who are performing better. So pay for performance is something that can be included as part of the personnel policies. But again, this has different kinds of unintended consequences as well. If pay for performance is there, then candidates might typically focus only on visible actions. Right? They will focus only on outputs. For example, they might focus on, let's say, providing a good, but if that good is leading to better outcome, that is another question. And maybe you
yeah.
will just focus on creating schools, but you might not focus on improving the learning outcomes, right? So
So,
those
and
kind,
even pay for performance is again very short term. See, these
yeah,
kind of the public goods outcomes take a longer period of time to fructify, to measure, to any of that. So when you try to link that the pay for performance to outcomes, then you might not get a suitable metric
yeah, yeah,
to measure them or to give out rewards.
Exactly. So whether it should be in the form of an input or an output, defining that might be something which is subjective. And also, I mean, pay for performance might not always work because many countries will have civil services regulations. Many will have different kind of budgetary restrictions as well.
Yeah,
So
and also won't it lead to like the capture of, I mean, if what is, it's a principal agent relationship between a bureaucrat and a politician also, right?
Yeah.
So if the politician who is evaluating me is I am going to do everything that will
Yeah,
actually please him. So
yeah, those kind of issues will be there.
issues.
If it is left to the politicians, yeah, this can be an issue. So I mean, yeah, so these things they have identified. So instead of pay for performance, maybe some other incentives can be there. Instead of pay, some other incentives, maybe better training, better postings. In that case, also you have these kind of challenges, but maybe some form of independent oversight mechanism might help here.
Okay, that's
So
interesting.
apart from these two dynamics, right, between a citizen and the bureaucrats and politician and the bureaucrat, there is another dimension, the politician and citizen interaction. So
Yeah,
we'll
before we go there, Sarthak, are you, I mean, through this bureaucrat politician diet that we're talking about, can we conclude that wholesale reforms are politically very fraught, like we are seeing with even with the IAS reform or the civil service reforms that we've been talking about for a whole long time, but we seem to move in fits and starts, and only small personal policy changes actually can, provide for some kind of a solution in this scenario.
yeah, so let's explore this after the break. We'll have a short break and then we will discuss this.
Security on a computer is like a layered cake. No matter how secure each layer may be, attackers and hackers will work tirelessly to find a vulnerability and exploit it. These cyber attacks can sneak into a system unnoticed, eventually gaining access to all the programs and files on your computer stack. Luckily, with Intel vPro platform, all of this is avoidable. Intel vPro has the Intel Hardware Shield, which adds protection to every layer of the computer system with 3 groups of security capabilities. Advanced Threat Protection, which helps quickly detect and remediate the latest ransomware and crypto mining attacks on the system. Below the OS Security, which helps identify unauthorized changes to hardware and firmware. And Application and Data Protection, which helps prevent memory corruption and malware injection. So secure your organization's productivity with hardware-based security only with Intel vPro. Visit intel.in/IT heroes to know more. Intel vPro, built for business.
Yeah, so welcome back. Suman, to answer your question, see, whether it is about extrinsic motivation or intrinsic motivation, at the end of the day, everyone is driven by incentives. So here also, I mean, even if you are hiring bureaucrats for a shorter duration, or you are having bureaucrats on pay for performance basis, maybe, I mean, just think of the targets, and not it should be only the politicians to whom this person is reporting. Maybe there can be some other independent oversight mechanism which decides on all these things. Maybe these kind of mechanisms can be there. There can be some checks and balances here which can be brought in place for having civil services reforms.
Sure. Yeah, I get that.
So apart from this, there is another dimension which the authors talk about in this paper. They talk about the linkage between politicians and the citizens. So basically, when do politicians pursue policies, or when do politicians allocate resources in the interest of their constituents? So generally, what happens, right? So governments
the signals that they get,
yeah,
right?
yeah, signals basically that. So what happens? What is generally what do we think is the linkage between politicians and citizens? So every more or less every 5 years, the politicians will come to the citizens. They will ask for votes. The citizens will elect them. And again, the politicians who are getting elected, they will either become member of the parliament, state legislative assemblies, or different municipal bodies, panchayat raj institutions, and the citizens will get different kind of services from them. So through elections, what is happening? A better politician can get selected, and those politicians who have not done well, or those politicians who the voters think are not good enough, they are not rewarded. So we would assume that through the process of election, citizens are rewarding or punishing politicians indirectly. This is a mechanism of electoral accountability, and through electoral accountability, citizens will get because of electoral accountability, citizens will get the services that they need. It's a mechanism of government responsiveness. So if there is regular conduct of elections, we would assume that citizens are getting the services that they desire. But this is not always the case. And in case of India as well, I mean, just think of it, right? Mostly we have regular elections, free and fair elections. There just couple of deviations may be there. Maybe during the time of emergency, we did not have elections, but generally we have elections. But does that mean our government is responsive?
No.
Yeah, not necessarily, right? So
Not in
we
all
need,
cases.
yeah, not in all, yeah. So only elections might not lead to government responsiveness, and we have to look at the nuances. Now, what are these nuances here? First of all, during elections, before elections, voters must be getting some form of credible signal of politician performance. If a politician is doing good or not, voters should be able to get that information. Second thing is, if the voter is getting information, they should be able to update their beliefs on the basis of the information. So it should be a rational updation of beliefs. And then there should be some viable alternatives. If there is no viable alternative, there is only one politician. So whatever signal the voters are getting, they will, I mean, there's no other option. They have to vote for the same person. So all these three things have to happen. So information and then updating beliefs on the basis of that and viable alternatives. But in many cases, what happens is information is not there. So as information is not there on politicians' competence, politicians' effort. So basically, voters don't know what kind of politician is out there. In such a scenario, they will vote on the basis of some other factors. They will take different kind of shortcuts, and they might use different kind of ethical markers for voting. So they might vote for a candidate who is from their own religion or from their own caste or from their own who speaks the same language. That's it. And in that case, the quality of public services, I mean, we don't know. I mean, most likely it will not be up to the mark because you have not chosen the right kind of political candidate.
True. Yeah. Yeah.
And one more thing, it's not just the information. I mean, you need to have information, but on top of that, you have to, I mean, voters will not trust all forms of information, right? So the source, it is dependent on the source of information, what kind of mode of dissemination of information happened. Certain kind of dissemination modes voters prefer. So they talk about some papers where they have studied that if there is electoral debates between political candidates, then voters change their whatever preconceived biases, whatever is there that is changed, their preconceived notions get changed. If local media is strong enough, it also plays a very significant role. Local media plays a role in updating the voters as well as coordinating the voters. The timing of information is also very important. So not only information, but source of information, mode of dissemination of information, when this information the voter received, all these things play a very important role. Then only the electoral accountability mechanism works.
Yeah, and I think in the current age of social media, of technology being prevalent, like all pervasive everywhere, these three are really almost critical to the entire process, right? So because of the fake news and whatever else you see.
Yeah. So definitely, I mean, information is important, but at the same time, as you pointed out, social media. So there can be disinformation. There can be some vested groups, so they want to manipulate information. So if they're manipulating information, so again, voters' preferences can change. And not only social media. If media is controlled, and which is most likely the case in many of the democracies, if the media is controlled, if the media is manipulated, it can have a bearing on the voters' preferences. So these are some constraints rightly pointed out.
Yeah. So to kind of bring the three together, we are, normally seeing, I mean, whatever we have studied or in most papers or most literatures talks about, one diet. We are not looking at triads. We are not looking at the interplay of all three actors, citizens, bureaucrats, and politicians. That kind of study we have not seen too much. And I think it'll be interesting to read on for somebody to do that stuff too, right?
Yes. And and I mean, it looks at the holistic picture. And so this paper actually tries to attempt that. And they have also some of these open questions now, which needs to be taken up, like some of the questions we also raised in the last couple of minutes.
So hopefully we should be able to do this over the next, the coming few years. We will have more literature on this, and we should bring this out in a more readable form to the general public, so that they are able to, make what they want, make what we wish out of the whole thing. And calibrate their preferences accordingly.
So as we're talking about future, there is an interesting survey that we are conducting. It's not about government responsiveness, but it's about India's foreign policy. So as different international events are happening, India's position in the global order might also get impacted. So what should be India's foreign policy priorities? This is something that we would want to get some inputs on. So at Takshila, we are conducting India's Global Outlook Survey. Please participate in the survey if you're interested. The link for the survey is along with this podcast.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarthak. It was good talking to you.
Thanks, Suman. Thanks to the listeners for tuning in. We'll meet again in one more episode of All Things Policy.
Thank you.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. Are the great values of our Constitution meant to be talked about by great men but not lived? On The Longest Constitution, Priya tells us about domestic violence laws in India and the many kinds of violence inflicted on women. Here's a fun conversation about online dating apps on Cyrus Says, as Cyrus is joined by Snehal Kanwar, co-founder and CEO of Truly Madly. On the Wire Talk, Siddharth is in discussion with Audrey Trishke, historian of South Asia and associate professor at Rutgers University. They discuss troll culture and the hate she received for her allegedly anti-Hindu views. On Audiogan, Kedar and Abhineet get some design perspective from Navneet Nair, director of design at PhonePe. And on Tere Mere Raste, Keshav takes us to Hyderabad, a melting pot of cuisine and culture. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. That is the most helpful thing that you could do to help us out. And finally, this week, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network, Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and Intel vPro. We really do appreciate the support. This is what makes it possible.
Don't you think that if everyone around you is getting smart, you better be smarter? Hey there, I'm the traveling professor Siddharth Deshmukh, and I'm back with season 2 of my podcast to make you smarter. Smarter with Sid. What's this season's focus about? Well, it's about 10-minute nuggets that will make you stand out at work. It's time to go from smart to smarter. Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday and become smarter with Sid.